now?
You don't look so good, Mom.
Nothing a big old kiss from you won't fix.
Congratulations on the film. It's fantastic. Something that I forgot that I just found out that, today is that you broke the franchise's record. That's the highest grossing film of the franchise so far. So congratulations on that.
It
Yeah.
is, yeah. Thank you, and I think it also is the highest amount of innocent people possessed and killed in an Evil Dead movie as well. So there's a couple of nice records there. I don't know which one makes me happier, that I've killed more people or that we've made more money, but either way, it's been great that people have gone out and seen the movie on the big screen. You know, it's super, and I'm really excited now that people get to bring mommy home and enjoy it in the discomfort of their own home, I hope.
And aside from that, a lot of the people, I was looking at the figures, a lot of the people weren't even born that I've gone to see it. So that must have, I mean, obviously it's a cult, it's got a cult following, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing now. But I mean, when you went to see it at the festivals and things like that, it must have been kind of great to see younger and older fans, because I know that you were really young when you saw it. So there must have been some like really young fans there that surprised you that they were so young, going to see these kind of things that you'd put on the screen, huh?
Yeah, like look, when I was going about making the movie, there was definitely a thought in my mind, or an intention that, you know, I look at, say, my nieces and nephews, for example, who love horror movies, but they're like younger, you know, like when I started writing the movie, some of them were probably like 12. By the time it's done, they're teenagers. But I kind of thought, like, I want them to be able to, and people like them to be able to experience a movie like this for the first time. And that was definitely on my mind. So yeah, there's no doubt that we did bring in both the fans, you know, who've responded to the movie, which is obviously of such amazing importance, and I'm so pleased I'm one of those fans myself. But also to know that there's a new generation that have, you know, been attracted towards the kind of, what the hell is this, you know, and they've gone in and then got on that bit of roller coaster ride and had a good time at the movies.
Yeah, because I mean, I went with my son a few months ago to the cinema, and he went in completely blind. He'd never seen any Evil Dead movies before, so I just kind of wanted to see his reaction as well. He's 14. Probably shouldn't say that, but yeah, I took him to the cinema.
And how did he do?
And as soon as we see the, I think we can mention spoilers now. As soon as the hair came off the scalp, he was completely sucked in, and he was. But the whole cinema was just, they were just covering their eyes. He loved it a bit, yeah, and he can't wait to see the previous films.
Oh, amazing. That's really, really cool. It's nice if this can be the gateway to discovery of more Evil Dead or more movies like this type of horror, then, you know, I think that that's something that makes me pleased.
I mean, so I'm talking about intro. It's a fantastic intro. It's like one of the best intros that I've seen to a horror movie, definitely. Was that kind of like the main idea, and that got the ball rolling, or did you have kind of the main narrative that we see later in the apartment block as kind of the idea for the film, or which one came first?
I guess, well, the main narrative did, of course, but I was toying with what this, as you know, is known as like a cold open. Like, the first thing I did before I even really thought about horror was I thought about context and characters and some metaphor, and actually that was where I started to explore. But the first thing I wrote was that cold open, because I had cracked it and knew what I wanted it to be. But it wasn't like I wrote it and then thought, where do I go next? You know, I had the movie mapped out on paper in terms of you know, what would happen, and it was always the intent that we would go from the countryside, from the forest, and then into the city. That was very much the idea. I wanted that opening to kind of bring some familiarity to the table, but also to subvert those familiar things and prepare the people watching the movie for something a little bit different, you know. And I think one of the fun things is you experience the horror inside that first 6, 7, 8 minutes. And then you go to the city and you see this happy family. And to me, that makes you or puts you in a place of dread, which is such a powerful building tool when you're having, you know, telling a horror story, you're trying to draw an audience in, because you know something bad's going to happen. You just don't know to who, how, and when it's going to take place, but you're already on edge. So that was very, very intentional. I saw this movie as, you know, kind of really, you know, people talk about a 3-act structure or whatever. And of course it has a lot of those traditional pillars in play, but really I saw it as this cold open to shake everybody up, and then the next section of the movie was make you fall for these characters and care for these characters, and then pull the rug out. That was really how I saw it, and just pull the rug out and go like a rocket, and see how many frights, see how many scares, and see how much I could do and how much I could toy with the audience.
Obviously, being a huge fan since a kid, then kind of, I mean, I know that you met Sam Raimi, and you've been asked about how all that came about, how you managed to end up doing the film, but then actually kind of getting to do the film, knowing that it's his baby. That must have been a really daunting task. I mean, obviously you said you want to pull the rug out from everyone's eyes, but before pulling the rug out from under everyone else's eyes, you want to pull the rug from Sam Raimi, but without you want to stick to his roots, and you want to kind of remain faithful and also kind of do justice to what he's done. So that must have been a really daunting task to kind of give him this pitch, and sort of imagine that he would go for it. So how did you kind of tackle that?
Yeah, I think, like, you know, there's Sam, and then there's Rob Tapert, and there's Bruce, and they're kind of a collective, you know, the stewards of Evil Dead, I suppose. And, you know, it's the thing that they built their careers on. It's the thing that they created. I was actually more excited. And I was excited because I'd met Sam on a few occasions, and I also know his sensibilities, and I also know my own taste and sensibilities. And thankfully, like, it's less daunting. The only bit to me that was ever daunting was, will I find a story that I want to tell, whether it's Evil Dead or not? And if I didn't, there was always that terror of having to say, thank you for coming to me, thank you for talking to me, but I can't find the way in. And that happens sometimes when you have discussions with people about projects, about ideas, or even your own idea. But early on, the guys really got what it was that I was trying to do. They liked that I was maneuvering it out of the cabin into somewhere else. They liked that I was making it about family. They liked the metaphors that were at play. And then in a way, the next big hurdle was just once I started to show them my ideas and deliver drafts of the screenplay, that they also knew that I would be capable of bringing the right level of horror to the screen, which they chimed it very quickly and had a really good time when they read the first draft of the script. So I was never daunted. It's definitely a daunting movie to make because it's so practical. Like, that aspect was really hard. But during the development process, I tried to keep excitement in the forefront of my motivation, because it was something I wanted to do and something I wanted to try and do to a really high level. Guys were really supportive.
Did they kind of set any ground rules, or did they give any kind of specific feedback that they wanted to make sure that you integrated in this movie to make sure that it kind of kept in line with what they were doing? Was there anything they wanted to do or they didn't want you to do specifically?
I don't care what happens to her. She's your girlfriend. You take care of her.
It was actually the opposite than giving ground rules in a sense. It was more, they very quickly knew, and from the discussions, again, they knew I understood the DNA of what makes an Evil Dead film unique. It was more at times, sometimes talking about, was there too much? You know, should we actually pull back a little, let it breathe a little bit more, being its own thing? Because they were actually very excited by all the new stuff that I brought to the table. So there was never, like, you know, Sam definitely, you know, up front was like, you got to use the book, make the Deadites scary. And I was like, that's a given. It was always going to happen. Yeah. I want that to be the case. It's nice to be reminded of those important pillars. And then it was really just, at times we would discuss and debate certain things that maybe just were too referential, you know, and getting that balance right. But that was in the early stages of development. And it was actually a kind of screenplay that once I wrote multiple drafts, but once we had the shooting script ready to go, I think everybody was just pretty confident about what was on the page.
I think the biggest kind of shift in tone is the fact that the first films that kind of focus on friends who are just kind of, it doesn't really matter if they die or not, because that's a horror movie and that's what happens. But here, obviously, there's a family there. It's a family that's at stake, you know, and you just, there's no way out. There's no way that they can all get saved. Why did you decide to go so dark? And where did you draw the line? Because I know that people kind of draw the line between kids dying and also dogs dying. I mean, you did actually save the cats. The cat survived. I was going to say there's a cat survived. So where did you draw the line there? And how did you manage to go? Just to finish that question, why did you manage to go so dark, and then manage to find so much humor in that darkness at the same time?
Yeah, there's a bit to unpick there. I think it shows that I'd rather have a cat than a kid, I guess. Like, from my point of view, once I crossed the line, it was like, this is an Evil Dead movie with kids. I had to go for broke, but that actually helped me find the tone, which was to keep, it's not quite levity, but there's a madcap nature to it all. It's not cartoony like Evil Dead 2, by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not as midnight black as, say, Evil Dead 2013, which kind of leans into, you know, a darker, more kind of sinister tone. And this film is obviously extremely sinister, and lots of sinister stuff happens and takes place. But the balancing act, again, it just all comes back to character, you know, finding those characters, finding a way in with them. And then in terms of the line, I never really felt like there was one. And that, again, is the joy of making an Evil Dead movie. But I also trust my own kind of taste. My taste isn't to hang around too long in violent moments, for them to happen and to move on. So even within sequences editorially, although, yeah, we cut back in the infamous cheese grater scene, but when someone gets stabbed through the head, and, I don't hang around. People, I always said, like, my approach would be, we'll put the knife in, but we won't stay there while we twist it around, twist it around. Because that actually, to me, does shift things slightly more into that kind of torture porn space, to put a label on it. Whereas to me, all of this violence, I actually wanted it to be entertaining and to move the story forward and to be propulsive and to actually create thrills and chills, as opposed to total disgust. I was never going, and there is disgusting moments and people will squirm and look away, but I never wanted to, like, I really didn't want to, like, hold your head underwater for too long. I wanted you to be able to breathe. That was kind of important. And then I think the kind of personalities of the characters, their own idiosyncratic ways, that weirdly brings the levity out in the story. It's like there's one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when little Cassie is sitting with Beth after she has impaled her sister to the head, and is, Beth is trying to kind of guide her into a.
I just love the way that you explain the scene, and it actually brings a smile to your face at the same time.
But yeah, it's like she goes, "You make a good mom someday," and you bet. And she's like, "Yeah, delight of kids." And that gets a laugh every time, and it releases a little bit of the tension. But it's also very true to the moment, because the thing that you've got to keep in mind, we're not finding these characters 6 months down the line suffering from PTSD. They're just in the middle of it. They're the same people they were that morning. They're just clinging on by their fingernails, but they're still the people they were, or not that morning, they were that morning or that evening that we met them. So from that point of view, it actually allows you to keep a certain kind of honesty and integrity to those characters. They're not completely destroyed yet. Meet them in 6 months' time, it would be a different story, and their therapy bills would be enormous.
You'd be a good mom someday, honey.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. You know how to lie to kids.
I imagine you kind of wanted to draw a line about how many Easter eggs you wanted in there as well. I mean, for example, there's a couple of nods to the Vine scene in the original film, which I know that in hindsight, Sam was a little bit kind of, he regretted it a bit, no? How was Sam with those Easter eggs, for example? And how were you in terms of kind of keeping it so that it didn't kind of overdo it with nostalgia, if you will?
Yeah, like, again, it's just process in a lot of ways. Like, it's never like, I was always happy to have more of it and then get rid of some of it at the script stage or even in the edit than be searching for those moments. But I just kind of went with what was fun to me. Take the eyeball one, which I wanted to have quite an overt tip of the cap to the past, versus there's some really, really subtle ones that are in there. Like the color of the chainsaw is the same color as the Oldsmobile. Yeah, or like another one I've been talking about a little bit more recently when we've been in spoiler territory is when after Ellie's in the bathroom and she goes crazy and jumps the ceiling and falls in the water, and she comes out of the bathtub after Beth and Danny, and when she pokes her head around the door frame, I emulated the famous artwork from the Evil Dead 2 cover of the skull and the eyes, which is actually not a shot in the movie, but it's a piece of artwork that I love. So I actually did like a bunch of takes, like a load of takes on that, to be happy with the specific angle, the look on the face, the direction of the eyes, and the kind of overall framing of the shot. So that's like a much more buried Easter egg that was kind of, for me, actually something that I was like, you're writing and like, oh, that'd be cool, because I love that shot. It screams Evil Dead to me, but it's not in the movie. Yeah. So it was kind of just about it. I guess I sometimes look at filmmaking a little bit like when you go to the supermarket, right? And you pick up all your ingredients, and that's great. You've got all the ingredients. It's actually when you bring them home and knowing how to measure things out, how to use the right amounts of seasoning, how to put the right bit of blood in the mix, how to play all of that. But I'd like to think that the movie breathes with its own voice, its own originality. And rather than, there's those couple of big spikes where, again, it really, really, plants a firm flag of reverence to the movies that came before. But the rest of the time, I feel like it's just the DNA and the lore that's kind of simmering throughout this story that's its own thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, to give me the 2-minute wrap. So just to finish off, I mean, obviously, I know that you've mentioned that you had 3 or 4 or 5 ideas for possible kind of sequels or follow-ups to this one, no? But rather than talk about that, because you've already talked about that, and I know that when you met Sam, you had already had ideas of where you would like to see Evil Dead go to now. I'm wondering if there's any other franchises that you'd like to, you've kind of thought about and processed a little bit, and you've got ideas that you would like to take anywhere.
Yeah, I've not gone too deeply on anything else. Like, there's things I love that I'd never touch, I was speaking to someone yesterday that mentioned, you know, I'd love to see what you'd do with Jaws, because I talk about it in one of my favorite movies, but I just wouldn't go near it with a barge pole, you know, like it is what it, like Jaws is one of those ones, with the greatest respect to all of the films that came after. It's just one and done for me. That's what it is to me.
No, just yesterday I wrote on Twitter, because I think it turned 47, 48 yesterday. No, and I was like, it's still the benchmark.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the spirit of the day that it is today, I wouldn't touch The Wicker Man, I don't think, either. Maybe it could be cool in a TV context, but certainly not as a movie. But the other one, and I don't have a take at all, but the one that I will say I would find extremely hard if someone came to me, a little bit like the way Evil Dead was. They didn't come to me with a brief. The guys just said, "What would you do?" And when they said, "What would you do?" I said about thinking. That's kind of actually how I work. I react to the circumstances rather than, because I write on my own original ideas. So when I'm writing, I'm working, I'm not really thinking about what I would do with a franchise. I'm more thinking about something unique that I'm working on. But when someone does slide something across my desk and it gets my attention, then I'll put the thinking cap on. And Nightmare on Elm Street would be the one that I would, and I have no idea what I would do, except what I would look to do is apply the same formula as I did to Evil Dead, which is there's lots of key things that also aren't in the movie. So it would be about trying to find a brand new way in. My point is, I'd find it really hard to not have a good go at it. But just like Evil Dead Rise, if I didn't crack something that I thought could be unique, I'd walk away. But if someone put that in front of me, I'd have a good, long, hard think about it.
And would you keep Robert Englund, or would you go for someone else if that ever happened?
Too early to say. Depends on what the idea is, right? He is Freddy at the end of the day. I think he said he's hung up the glove though. So
yeah, but
you never know. You never know.
Brilliant.
I'd like to see. I'd like to have a stab with what I do with tone at Nightmare on Elm Street, which is I think I could make it really dark and scary, and I think I could temper it with just the right amount of levity and wit without it becoming crazy or, again, too sinister and too dark. So it'd be an interesting challenge, but whether that one ever, comes through the mailbox remains to be seen.
Well, I hope someone's listening and watching out there. Thanks so much for your time. I'll leave you to think about that Nightmare on Elm Street remake, and I hope to speak to you again sometime soon about something that's coming out soon.
Great, lovely to talk to you.
All right, all the best. Congratulations again, Lee. Take care. All right, all the best. Take care.
Cheers, dude.
Mom?
Mommy's with the maggots now.
What will be, will be.